Hello, everybody. This is Billy Delgado along with Michael Pugh. Mike, how you doing?
Doing good, man.
This is great. So this is another episode of State of LA. We got a special guest today. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to introduce him by Dr. Guillermo Rodriguez. A little brief background. Guillermo and I, we were both working in men's residential in the Central Coast, one in Watsonville, and then later in Salinas. Great counselor for population of men and rehabilitation. And then later on, he pulled me aside and he said, hey, I'm going to start working on my bachelor's degree. And hopefully soon enough, I'm going to start writing letters, build up more of my resume, and pursue my master's degree. And my eyes widen with admiration. So let's just give a warm welcome to Dr. Guillermo Rodriguez. Guillermo, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well on this beautiful morning. Well, a little cloudy over here where I'm at.
Same here. And Mike, how's the weather down in LA?
Actually, looks pretty clear on my end.
Yeah. This is great. So, Guillermo, today I want to cover a little bit of your success story. And I wanted to tell people Guillermo is not from LA. So he's born and raised in the Central Coast within the Salinas area. But Guillermo had one great objective, and that was to pursue his master's and bachelor's degree in the University of Southern California. I wanted to bring him over to our pod. He's not a former LA resident, but a man with an objective coming in and pursuing 2 different degrees. And I want to get more of his LA experience. But Guillermo, go ahead. Can you give us a little rundown, a little brief history of who you are?
Yes. Again, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still getting used to saying Dr. Guillermo Rodriguez, right? Because I'm a humble individual. And usually when I work with people or in leadership roles, I always say, I'm not better than, less than, equal as you are. So we work as a team. Born and raised in Salinas for most of my life. I moved away for a little bit up north and down south just to explore a little bit what was out there for me. Within your show, some people leave LA to explore themselves. Others come to LA to explore themselves. So I kind of did that a little bit to kind of, see where I would land. But eventually I ended up coming back home with the mission to see, what I needed to do for myself. Obviously growing up I call it a single home because it was just my mom, even though I had 5 siblings, but they were older. My mom had me at a later age, at the age of 44. So I kind of grew up as the only child, even though I had 5 other siblings, but they were already older. So they were also like co-parenting with my mom, as, my dad was out of the picture during that time. So living with my mom, I was able to explore a lot of things on my own, find out, what I wanted to do with school. But one thing I did not know for sure, and most of us don't know when we fall into the world of addiction, was that I was going to become an alcoholic and drug addict, something I never thought I would do or explore. But once I tried it, I liked it. That was my personality. I liked it, and I kept doing it over and over. After high school, I just went on a decline of my substance use, knowing that I could do a lot better for myself. Eventually, kind of share this story, because this story kind of leads to where I'm at today. One night, I was hanging out with some friends, partying, drinking, having fun. We all crashed out, went to sleep. They took the keys away from me and gonna just wake up the next day and go home. But somehow I woke up in the middle of the night, found the keys to my vehicle. I got into the vehicle and drove. I guess I was going home or somewhere. I ended up driving away from the property. And pretty soon the sirens were right behind me. And before I knew it, instead of pulling over, I went on a high-speed chase. So the high-speed chase lasted for about maybe 5 minutes, I want to say, from the intersection where I entered into the freeway. I entered through the opposite end of the freeway, so I was going against traffic for a good 5-minute stretch until I came up around a bend and crashed into another vehicle. And that's where everything changed for me. Obviously, using drugs was what changed for me, but getting into the accident, seeing a police officer asking my name. I knew of the story when I read about it, obviously from the police officer's report, from the news media. People were asking me if I was trying to commit suicide. Because during that time, I was working full time. I was taking care of my business, my bills, my rent, but I was just hiding my addiction. So most people didn't know I was going through this. I woke up in the infirmary unit in jail. And from there, I just never saw outside for a while. I went to court thinking I would be released since I didn't have much of a background. But while I went through this accident, I was having a pending DUI case. So when I went in front of the judge, they sentenced me to 3 years in prison. place I never thought in my whole life I would go, a place that my mom never thought I would go. Migrated from Mexico to give her children a better life. It's not something that they have aspiration of thinking. I went to prison for those 3 years. I got out in 2007, Thanksgiving Day, a day that we always think about being grateful and thankful for. And I remember 1 week before leaving prison, I wanted to go home. And then I was like, if I go home, I'm going to go to the same behaviors, same people, things are going to be the same. So I just need to do something different. Because while I was behind the walls, I was able to learn a little bit about my addiction, but not so much because I was still in that stinking thinking mind frame like, oh, I'm just going to go back and do this and do that. I could do better. I'm going to stop. But yeah, I went back to the counselor and asked for that option still of going to treatment. And she said, yeah, there was two options, either Watsonville, which was about 20 miles from home, or San Luis Obispo, which is about an hour and a half. So I chose Watsonville, which is closer to home for family to visit. I ended up staying in that program for 6 months. On the day that I graduated or transitioned, I still wasn't ready because I had not officially been out in the community. So I was afraid to face the community. I think most of all, I was just afraid of myself. Did I change? Was I going to fall back into my addiction? But once I got out, went to a sober living environment home, that's when down the line, I met you in regards to the world of recovery or collaborating, right, with helping others, substance use disorders and working in inpatient. And pretty soon I was working in these places where I was, and then I started giving back because I understand what they were going through. And that led me to going back to school, getting my AA in psychology and human services, and then getting my bachelor's in collaborative health and human services with interdisciplinary social work and public health. And then jumped into getting my master's of social work. I thought I was done. Those journeys I thought I was done with my AA, like, no, Guillermo, you could keep going. Got my BA, no, Guillermo, you have a lot to give back. So then I got my master's, and that was it in a sense. I took a break from school, and then I had more of a bigger purpose. I was like, I need to leave and explore what's going out there. What school is doing some work, or what community can I go and check out to see what's happening? That's when I kind of explored different schools, and I looked into University of Southern California as an option for me to go and get my doctorate in social work. I had a mission, I had a goal. And I knew LA had a struggle with the unhoused population and substance use disorder. And when I would go down there and visit, people would go to vacation, right? Go vacation to LA. I would do that. But sometimes my own curiosity would lead me to go down to the streets of LA and just check out the scene of what's happening. What was the raw deal that was happening out there? Even visiting some methadone clinics just out of curiosity. Since I was a manager at a methadone clinic, I wanted to see what other places were doing, especially in the city of LA, what resources, barriers, red tape were happening that either we were facing or something I could learn to take back to my own community. So I kind of knew, I was like, okay, I chose University of Southern California. But when I applied, I was denied admission. I was denied admission saying I needed to have 5 years post of my master's of social work degree. And that was maybe a year and a half after my MSW. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to take a no for an answer. I lived life as an addict. I worked in residential and outpatient treatment. My post experience was pre all this, right? So what I ended up doing, I reapplied again. Instead of answering some of the questions, I tailored it to my own story of my own struggles, my own addiction, my own drinking, my own fears and consequences, incarceration. And I used that as my experience of why I should be given an opportunity. And yes, once I did that, I was given the thumbs up that I was accepted to the doctors of social work at USC. And that was one of my greatest moments ever in my life. And take that no for an answer. I pushed and moved forward with it. And so I started in 2019 at USC, and then I stopped going to school in 2020 because of the pandemic that was happening. Everything went remote. But at the same time, I was working at a hospital during that time. Well, I didn't drop out. I took a break. Because I was focusing on what the world was happening and with my employment at the hospital. And they gave me permission to be away for a semester. But pretty soon, a semester turned into 3, 4 semesters. A year passed by, and I was like, I need to get back to it. Technically didn't reapply. Almost having me to reapply because it was so long. Again, I advocate for myself. This is what I always tell people and clients, always advocate. Always make sure you advocate for yourself to the fullest. And that's what I did. And I was able to not restart the program, but just jump into another cohort and still keep my credits and units And yes, like Billy mentioned, I graduated this year in April 2024 with my bachelor's in social work. And it was one of the greatest moments ever because I was able to have my mom, who is still here with us, she's 86. And that was a moment I wanted her to see for her son to be on that stage of honor, respect, and be able to give back to the community. And I've learned so much from the community of LA, USC, and what to bring back to my own community to be able to continue to fight, they say fight on with the mission and purpose that I have in this life.
Wow, that's a great story, Guillermo. And to what you mentioned, it's just about the addiction, the fallback, pretty much like what we say in recovery, right? What was your pit, right? What was your rock bottom? It was that car accident. And then from that car accident, it helped you to reflect, especially being in front of the judge, to giving a window of an opportunity to go to recovery and choosing between places, and you chose what was closer to home. Then having that fear to going back to the community, to face the community, because the community gives you old challenges, right? And there's many lapses in behavior of what the community could offer you to see if you are the same person. However, you went on and helped out your community of being almost a social worker and advocate of recovery and rehabilitation, from going to methadone clinic, men's residential, going back to school, the hurdles that school offered you to you not taking no for an answer. And then the pandemic came that we all faced through globally. And you went in there to get the success, but you also explored LA, right? We'll get to that a little bit later on. So let's keep that in mind about exploring LA. As you mentioned, you went to other mental clinics. What is the community offers? What's the hurdles there? What can you bring back to your own community?
Correct.
So now being a successful son to your mom, being blessed, your mom is 86 years young.
Yeah.
And seeing you graduate with honor, right? Now, let's go back a little bit to the time we met. And it was one great, fateful Friday evening when they told me about you. Oh, Guillermo is coming. And that's when you actually helped me to understand the ropes about addiction and this and that. That place we met in Watsonville, this men's residential we met in Watsonville, they have a graduation song, is De Colores. And De Colores is about springing. And I want to tie it up. When you heard those first words when you were graduating from that program and you sang that song with many of your peers and counselors at the time, what was going through your mind? Can you reflect a little bit on that when you hear that song? Because even though when you became a assistant director at the men's residential in Salinas, you actually started saying you came here as a bare tree. Now you spring, you blossom, be vigilant. So tell me more about your experience of like listening to that song, graduating from recovery.
It taught me a lot. It taught me to look back on my history and roots because that program is centered in cultural perspectives in the raza and everything. So when you're singing that song, you're singing it in Spanish. So the ones that were monolingual English speakers had to learn that song in Spanish. Most programs, the roles are reversed, right? The Spanish speakers have to learn something in English or they're lost. So it's very unique to have that happen when we were singing it in Spanish and having my family there for them to understand what we were singing. And then, but what made me really kind of awe in that moment is just the history of the song, where it comes from, right? Campesinos and all that. And the struggles. The struggles are real. The struggles are going to be there. Everyone struggles, no matter what. If you're high, low, middle income, everyone struggles in different ways. It's just how we get out of their struggles. So when I was singing that song, and graduating, I knew, okay, there are going to be more struggles for me to face. Have I learned enough tools? Am I going to be successful? Like, I still had a lot of questions, like a lot of questions that either A, the program could not answer, or B, my parole officer couldn't answer. It was going to be up to me to answer those questions because we take what we give, right? And each client is going to be different. And one thing I do remember is just looking around because I learned, I think, a stat stating that 1 out of 10 make it, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of looking around like 1 of 10, and there's, I don't know how many of us in that time graduating. And I was just counting. I was like, oh man, am I going to be the 1 out of 10? Am I going to relapse? Am I going to come back? I just didn't know because I hadn't faced the real world yet. I guess you could say, well, the program is a house, but I was still behind some rules and the walls and everything. And I was going to just be on my own. The only rules I had to follow was pro rules, and that was it. But basically, I was on my own. So that song meant a lot during that time. Thank you for reminding me about that song because it's been a while since I brought it up or listened to it.
Yeah. And to give a little bit of a background, community of both Salinas and Watsonville, it's an agricultural community that people work in the fields between the months of March to November. And as Guillermo stated, people go to different type of struggles. It could be economic struggles, family struggles, any type of hurdle this community goes to. But this community is what helps to put food on the plate because of the agricultural life. And it ties in because the reason Guillermo said that, hey, the song comes in Spanish because the program Guillermo was in was a Latino-based program. And his mom was able to watch his son graduate from this program and understood the concept of what was going on about bringing into action. Wow. Now let's transition, Guillermo, working at a methadone clinic afterwards. And I believe that's when I first met you and I started learning what success stories is coming from addiction. What was your experience working at a methadone clinic? What questions you were asking yourself as a helper in order to help with those who were struggling with methadone?
I'm a strong believer of faith. I feel like I was saved for a purpose, not just once, twice, three, probably multiple times in life when I was in my addiction and especially in that accident. To tell you the truth, I should have died that day. The way that car was just crumbled up, everything. I should have died.
Right.
But I was saved for a purpose and I continue with that purpose. And so every time I don't leave a job because I'm like, oh my God, I hate this job, or I don't want to be at this job anymore. I transition jobs because I feel like I've done a little what I needed to do here to either motivate the team, help the patients, and do what I need to do and learn, and go on to the next phase of my learning and growing and giving back to the community. So I feel like God places me in these situations. So when I learned about the substance use disorders, but obviously the medication assisted treatment, MAT, such as the methadone clinic, something I've never heard of, but I knew of. So I was really intrigued to see what is this clinic giving to the community, giving back to the community, or helping the opiate users to overcome their adversities and addiction. So I went to that clinic and learned so much. And pretty soon I realized that this was a hardcore community to deal with, but they were also true and honest. If you needed to hear something, they would be honest about what was working and not working. So that helped to develop a lot of policies and procedures, at least in the clinic I was in. And being in the role I was, in the leadership I was in, I was able to deal also the demographics of the clinic, dealing with not just the men and women, but also the gangs of the community, knowing that they were coming for the same reason, but understanding that there was still kind of a war happening out there between them. And I had to learn about that. I knew of it, but just in the addiction world and within this clinic, it was very interesting to learn.
Got it. And then you teaching me the ropes after that, you brought me into your own world, especially how some of the challenges you were facing, as you mentioned, the gang community, how to keep a community safe from gang violence, and then be an advocate of recovery, and then help others who are helpers, who are counselors as well, help them understand that addiction is here, it's present. Mm-hmm. We need to help without any judgment. We just guide them every step of the way that suits the client.
And that's where I learned about harm reduction, right?
Right.
Harm reduction is something that's been out for a while, but most people just didn't understand and knew what that was. And then when they learned about it, I was like, wait a minute, you're telling someone to use? It's like, no, you're not telling them to use. You're just telling them to be careful what the consequences for. You're giving them education so they can make their own informed decisions, right? And then eventually, yes, it will work where they'll be like, I'm tired of this, and they stop using. So when I went to another program in Salinas to work at as the assistant director, that one was a tough. I dealt with the clients, but I was also dealing with the staff. I call them the old school thinkers and new school thinkers. Mm-hmm. Old school thinkers was like, we're abstinence-based and you got to stop using. It's like, whoa, okay, like that's going to kill someone, or people are going to leave and they're actually going to die out there. They're trying to trust you, but you're just being negative, right?
Right.
That was the old school thinking, like abstinence, and most people will do it. But medically, that could be dangerous. So then the new school thinking is the harm reduction ways. So I had to educate a lot of these staff that were old school thinkers to kind of transition to, not saying leave their old ways, but mesh them together and see how we could collaborate. And that's where dual diagnosis came in with a lot of these treatment centers. So yeah, it was tough working with staff who just didn't want to, and they transitioned away because they just couldn't deal with it no more, or with the change. And it reminded me of some clients who just also transition out because they cannot deal with the change of their own mental state of mind or personalities. And it's a lot to deal with when they go through recovery.
Yeah, I want to dive in because you transitioned pretty fast from when I first met you to you come in and help me on one of the Friday nights at the men's house in Watsonville. And you were like, hey, I'm applying for this position. I'm going to be the assistant director. I haven't got word yet, but I'm like really transitioning. I'm really looking forward. And then you gave me a background information of what that program offers from detox, how they take classes, how they take responsibilities for themselves, like cleaning up early in the morning to cooking and slowly gradually progressing to reading reflections in the morning and learning about the 12 steps to transitioning to activities at night and so forth, especially how evidence-based programming was the focus. And not only in the house in Salinas, but also the house in Watsonville, which came into recovery. Well, tell me, like, from what I recall, you were excited to take on this responsibility of being assistant director, right? And working with your close to community in Salinas.
Yeah.
How was that like transitioning rapidly? That's the way I took it from an outside looking in. Like you graduated from this program a couple of years ago to now working as a counselor in a methadone clinic. And now he's going to be an assistant director. This success story is very intriguing. What was going through your mind in transitioning? And then we'll get back to, the old school thinkers in a bit.
Yeah. So during that time when I was offered that job, I was obviously happy, ecstatic, but at the same time, I was still nervous because I was transitioning to a position that I wasn't aware of or what to do. But I was like, I'm ready to take on this challenge. And that's how I've been. I'm ready to take on these challenges and learn from it because if we fail, I'll be sober when I fail. And I'm able to recognize when I fail and be able to learn from it and move forward. So when I got that assistant director position, I was like, okay, now we're making progress. Now I'm being recognized for the work that I'm doing in the community or just for who I am as a human now and be able to give back. But at the same time, every time I would apply for a position, I would always get nervous because of my background, right? That always sticks in my mind, no matter what, up to this day, I still get nervous. I was basically leaving one county to go to another county, but I was going back from Santa Cruz County to Monterey County, where I was born and raised. So I was like, I'm going back home. Because ever since I left prison, I went to that program in Santa Cruz County in Watsonville, and I had just lived there for most of my time. And now finally I was actually going back home. And that was like the scary thing, like, wow, going back home and I'm going to be seeing people that were doing the things with me probably in these programs because I'll be in the smack right of town. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so when I went there and I learned, and it was just a proud moment because I knew it was like there's a lot more for me to give back in this community, and being the assistant director kind of opened that window because when I told that program I had another offer, that's when they jumped in like, this is what we have to offer you. And at that time, Billy, I had two offers. I had an offer to be the assistant director for that program, and I had another offer on the table to be a program manager for another agency. So I had two offers, and that's when I knew I was like, I'm blessed. People see what I'm worth at that moment and that I'm growing. And so I went with the one in Salinas, the residential program, because I already had some knowledge about that program and I was ready to take on the reins.
Now let's cover old school thinkers to being a firm believers of harm reduction. And let me take you back on a Saturday morning at the men's residential in Salinas. Mm-hmm. I was under your watch, okay? Because just to give everybody a background information, Guillermo told me about the program from Salinas while I was working in Watsonville. I got interested. I took a job role there as well and followed Guillermo. So he was like one of those sports agents that steals talents and takes talent and mold the talent.
Because I saw what you're capable of. I saw your worth and I saw your passion, your energy. It's like, that new school thinker is what we need.
Yeah. And here's one of the things that we came across, and I believe it was close to my end of my shift. It was around 2:00. We found substance in our property. And, I fairly transitioned from one program to another. And I had that old thinking mind, like, ooh, somebody's gonna, it's gonna get kicked out of the program. And I said, Guillermo, I'm here to observe. And that's what I told you. I'm here to observe and I want to learn from you today. And you took it upon yourself to lead me. And we had a whole house meeting about how to be honest, how to not break that trust, how we should be focused on recovery. Yeah, we all have the temptations. As you mentioned earlier, just creeps up at any moment given in time, and how to resolve our issues when things fail or things backfire, right? I thought someone was getting kicked out, but I was grateful to see that no one got kicked out. No one was pushed out on the street at 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon to fend for themselves. I was nail biting. I had a culture shock because we were coming from a program from Watsonville, like, hey, you know what? If they're not honest for themselves and they're not ready, it's an open door. They got to go, but, we got to go through the process, right? They're discharged automatically. We got to call their probation officer, let them know they were not being honest. They sneak in substance use in a recovery program. They have to go so they don't harm the others. But you came in and advocated about, no, you know what? You got to stay and just be honest with yourself in order not to break the trust with others. What was going on with your mind that Saturday, if you recall?
I kind of put myself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I've been judged, thrown out to the street personally, but also when I was incarcerated, the way I was treated. And when they would confiscate my things, it's just all those that came into mind. It's like, that's traumatizing, right? Yes, I have maybe some PTSD from that experience, but I was able to cope and deal with it and be able to give back. So at that moment, just even for school, being educated, I've learned that humans are going to be different no matter what. Like, for example, you and I could be friends, and then one morning you say, hey, Guillermo, good morning. What the f is a good morning about? And all of a sudden, you want to fight me because that triggered you and got you pissed off. And it was like, wait a minute. And I would let them know, like, sometimes a good morning could be a good morning. Sometimes a good morning is not a good morning for everybody. So don't be offended. So when we have these impulsive behaviors, and that's why I think about the old school thinkers versus the new school thinkers is understanding the human behavior of it, the cognitive ability. Some of us are going to have the impulsivity of it, where some of us are just going to react to it and do it. And when something we're told, don't do that, we're going to do the opposite. And some of these men did that, right? They were still learning their own stinking thinking behavior. And when either they were caught or were asking questions about who they belong to, where they're going to be honest. And maybe if some were honest, it was like, okay, thank you for being honest. This is what we're going to do to work with you so it doesn't happen, right? And it gives them a sense of, well, okay, I'm making progress and honesty and be able to move forward. So yeah, I had to learn that in the very beginning because before you got there people were getting kicked out left and right for just the smallest thing, just for being upset and angry and yelling. Okay, get out of here. I was like, wait a minute, are you sitting down and talking to them and just asking them what's going on? No, they can't be yelling and fighting here. I was like, okay, well, there's a reason why that happened, right? And we just had to go to the bottom of it. So having the house meeting, so everyone understood, not where I was just coming from, but just sort of this change that we're trying to create in this culture, in this program. And it gave them a sense of respect because autonomy is very important, right? You want to do things that nobody else is watching that are positive, right? If you're doing the negative things, then that's on you, on your conscience. So that's kind of was like the takeaway for them. That created respect too for others and for staff.
That's right. And to give a big background, these programs used to run 6 months, sometimes 9 months, right? And during your time when I was at recovery, like 07, 09, and the county started to look back, wait, because of Medi-Cal or other insurance, we're only giving people 3 months at a time. And people go through stages, right? Detox.
Yeah.
Your first stage, we call them phases, right? Your first phase. Okay, you started getting a little responsibilities in the house, from cleaning to working in the kitchen to being your dorm moderator, right? Get this responsibilities. And then you go to phase 2. Oh, hey, you know what? Like, you're becoming already a senior resident. You could take buddies and guide them to the street so they could get away from temptation and follow the process. So phase 3. And all these different phases, right? To what you pulled in to say, hey, be honest with yourself, be honest with others, and don't break the trust. Because from the person that has been here for like 2 to 3 months working on themselves, it all trickles down to the person that just barely got in. Because we're all in recovery, but we all come through the different paths of life that got us here. And we only have one thing in common, is to work on ourselves and work on recovery and support one another and lean on each other and then keep moving forward, right? This is the part where graduating started to kick in. And that's when people were already coming close to their 90 days. And we had graduation. We would give them a coin and we would do a blessing to the coin. And then we would say something positive. And one of the things that I do remember is about being vigilant to themselves and to their recovery. How did that come all about in your mind, Guillermo? And how do those words develop in your mind in order to tackle on the real world in their community?
They came about because, once they left the facility, they were somewhat on their own. But at that time, they had a collaborative treatment to support them, but also being vigilant about what the next step was going to be. Was it going to be a positive or a negative step for them, right? Even if, for the ones that were behind the walls.
Mhm.
You create this strong sense of vigilant behavior where you're just kind of looking around your surroundings, your space, you're being careful, but at the same time, you're having this keen sense of awareness,
Mhm.
right? And that's why I would tell them just be vigilant of your surroundings, be vigilant of the people who are going to be in your circle, because, no matter what, there's going to be danger out there, right? It's either going to be visible or it's going to be hidden. And being aware about that and being a step ahead to know what reaction and what kind of consequences will come from that. So it was important for them to know because when they were in the program, yes, they were sheltered in the home away from danger, but even danger happened in the program, as you talked about, finding that substance in the program.
Mhm.
But just being out there in the real world. So it took a lot for them to heal and to be able to move forward, especially if there was mental health involved as well.
That's right.
But overall, what you're talking about in regards to the structure of the program,
Mhm.
and there's research on this of the social model of recovery.
That's right.
The social model is doing the next best thing for someone to see, right?
Yes.
So that's why some programs work because the new ones that would come in will get linked up with the older ones, meaning that not old in age, but the ones who've been in treatment for maybe a month or two, they're able to give that helping hand to the new ones coming in to say, hey, this is how we do this in the program. This is how we behave. This is what we do. It's kind of a brotherhood that was created there, but not just with the clients, but also social model was with staff as well. And some staff will forget that,
Mhm.
right? Because they had that privilege, like, oh, I could do whatever I want. Like, no, you are a social model representative. Clients are going to see what you're doing. And they'll be like, oh, okay, well, she or he doesn't even come to the meetings on time. So why should we come into meetings on time? Right.
Mhm.
And so that it's a learned behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, it's about modeling and how recovery works from the structure, from getting up in the morning to going to a meeting at night and then going to sleep. And then the counselor's reflecting that, hey, this is when rubber meets the road, right? This is how you apply recovery in your own community. And this is how you be vigilant. Now,
Mhm.
that year, it's spring of 2017, you're already close to wrapping up your bachelor's degree. We got the picture of you on your cap and gown. Very proud moment. And I think we were parading around. I think I was parading around your photo around the facility because it was a proud moment. I was like, hey, he's a director. This is how his exterior looks like. He already got his bachelor's degree. Let's celebrate Guillermo. My lead up question is what got interest to you? Like, keep going. Si se puede, like transitioning to a master's degree. And what were your thought process at the time?
The thought process at the time was I'm done with my bachelor's and let's just get back into the working world because I need to make money.
Obviously.
but also my heart was out there, it was difficult. It was difficult working full time and going to school full time too. I had to do it because I was on my own. But the moment that made me realize I needed to move forward was when two professors nominated me for the Provost Award at the university, which was the second highest award in the university. When I got that call, I think I cried. I was shocked, surprised, because I was like, go to class, do what I needed to do, share my input, encourage others. I realized, whoa, okay, they were paying attention. They saw how I was giving back to my peers, the community, and everything, and just where I come from. And yeah, so they nominated me, and then so I had to write like a proposal as well, and then they nominated. I did not win, but the one who won, obviously, he did a lot of things out there in the community, and I was proud of that. But just being humble that I was nominated out of thousands of students I could have chose from. I'm even thankful for this day. Like every year or so, I'll reach out to those two professors. Hey, thank you. This is the time you guys nominated. This is like a reminder, like just to say, keep doing the work you're doing. So that made me be like, okay, I need to continue because education is important. And if I want to be like them, having their masters or doctorates in this field, I need to get to that point. So I applied for the master's of social work. And then I got in. I didn't just get in. I got into the first 2-year cohort that they had created. And so I was one of the 12 peers that was going to be that new cohort with learning, right? Learning how they were going to navigate through the whole process. But yeah, I had a lot of people cheering for me, besides you at the program, but at the university, my own life. And sometimes where we are our own worst enemy, we could be our own last cheerleader. But internally, I was kind of rooting for myself to get into that program and got in.
Wow. And how long did it took to earn your master's degree afterwards?
So I graduated with my bachelor's in 2016 in the spring.
Oh, sorry for getting the dates wrong. I stand corrected. Yeah.
So 2016. that same year, I jumped into my master's in the fall.
Mm.
So I started right away. I was like, if I take a break, I'm just going to get into this working mode or something. And I've seen that with other students where it's hard to get back to the school mode, especially when you're involved in so many things. So yeah, I had the summer off and then jumped right into it. And then I graduated in 2018, 2 years later.
Now let's transition to Los Angeles. And there's a controversy of like, what's native, what's transplant, right? And you came in, you're not labeled either one or, but you came in with an objective, with a plan, doctor degree, Los Angeles. And you said earlier today that you have moved up and down the state and been in big cities before. Tell us about Los Angeles being one of the biggest cities, one of the biggest populations in the state. What was your thought process of moving into a big city, coming in from a small community of Salinas, especially an agricultural life, to now to a big city? What was that transition like?
And my PTSD came back. Kidding. I mean, it was nerve-wracking because the reason when I originally first left, went down south, things were just obviously bigger, a lot more options, everything in my mind. It's like, oh my God, what do I choose from? Where to go here? Where to do this? There's a lot of this. My mind was just racing in different formats instead of being able to concentrate where I need to concentrate. So it was a lot to take in. But at the same time, I was like, I knew I was there for a purpose and for a reason. And I was going to take as much as I could away from my educational journey there. It was a lot of ups and downs, obviously from the systems perspective to an academic perspective, and just navigating through a lot of different things and choices and what I had to do for myself, right? I would go back and forth from LA, Salinas. It was just time consuming, but it was the best moments ever because I learned what that community was doing with different type of programming in regards to substance use, mental health, but also what was not being done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my project came into perspective. So my project for my doctoral program focused on obviously substance use disorder, because that's I don't want to say my comfort zone, because I'm still learning about it, because it's always changing, right? Especially with research and what's happening out there. But then when I did a lot of research in LA and the communities around there, harm reduction and the fentanyl phase that's happening, the youth overdose epidemic that's happening, right?
Yes.
Then when I started asking questions at different schools in LA, up north, down south, just different schools of what they were doing to kind of prevent youth overdoses and what kind of education was happening, they're like, we're not doing much. And then if there was education being provided, it was targeted most with high school kids. I was like, well, curiosity starts at a very young age, especially now with social media. You wouldn't be surprised like how young these kids knew about fentanyl, drugs, and meth and alcohol and just different things, because they just click on a button on their phone and they could see a lot of things.
Right.
So my project was focused on the youth epidemic that was happening with the overdoses and how to implement educational curriculum to help not just the students, but the instructional facility as teachers and principals to learn a little bit more. So I created the Otter Be Safe curriculum, and this Otter Be Safe curriculum is for elementary school students, and it's a 6-week course that speaks about the harm reduction, fentanyl craze that's out there, Narcan, which is naloxone, and where to get help, and basically teaching them the tools how to stay safe if they come across a medication, a prescribed medication, if somebody's offered them drugs, what are some things they could do, and basically giving them the empowerment to make those choices. So that helped me being in LA and just asking different questions in my own community as well, asking different questions and how that compare and contrast. And that was the missing piece there. Like, I don't want to say nothing's being done, but the target areas were late middle school and high school only. And they're like, oh, we don't talk about that in elementary school. It's like, no, you need to talk about that in elementary school. And that's where the project came.
And for people that don't know, right, when you go up to higher learning, master's degree, doctor degree, research has to be done. And this is your long research. And this is what you're able to apply from that research, especially in mental health and recovery, and continue working on with the population. And you covering more on safety and how to be safe, especially with the youth epidemic and the research you made based on LA. So How many chapters did you write? Was it the typical 5? How long did it take for you to do your research?
No, yeah, it was a typical 5,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more than a year to begin that research. I think research started sort of when I already had the idea, like on day one.
Mm-hmm.
There was challenges, obviously, reaching out to the schools, like, we don't want to talk about that. I'm sorry, we can't talk to you about this. And it was tough. It was a reality check as well. Like, a lot of these schools don't want to talk about it. Or I learned about the policies and procedures within the school districts of LA and in my hometown of Monterey County. And it was tough. It was sad to see, but also the assembly bills that were happening in the state of California where the health courses were removed. So if you think about substance use, drug addiction, and sex ed, that falls under that category. So when it becomes optional, most people don't opt for that. Like, we're not going to teach that. It's an option, but we're not going to talk about drugs or sex or anything like that. So we're going to leave it out. There are some schools that are like, yeah, we do that during October, which is the Red Ribbon Week, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But they only do it for that 1 week and that's it. And what about for the rest of the year?
Right.
So that, took a lot. It did research. So yeah, that created the whole curriculum of it and what to do and what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
So actually 2 school districts in my county have looked at it and will implement that in their elementary schools to make it work. And pretty soon, once it gets published, there'll be a children's book published along with it to kind of go with the curriculum and kind of make it more of engagement for the students and the teacher who's teaching it. But yeah, it took a lot of research of back and forth. And sometimes like, do I even want to do this? Because this is tough because I'm getting a lot of negativity, a lot of why you're doing this, or just not responses from principals who I'm trying to reach out to. But luckily 2 principals reached out and like, hey, we'll help you with this. And they became my kind of project mentors to kind of give me what they go through in a daily basis in the school setting. Since I'm not a school social worker or don't work at a school, I learned a lot of, if I needed to do this, I'm only allowed so much time for each section, right? And it's not because that's how they want it. It's because of the academic curriculum that's already in place. Like, each section had to be to certain minutes. And it was very interesting. It was fun, but very hard to do.
Right. Okay. So did you meet other people that came to visit to LA? And this is where I want to tackle, right? The transplants versus the natives. How did the natives of LA take you in, welcomed you? They were welcoming? Or did you meet other people from other communities that moved down to LA and embarked on the journey with you for a doctorate degree? Any thoughts on that?
I fell out of place.
Okay.
I fell out of place because obviously it's not my community, but at the same time, I was trying to find a connection with students or the community, or even just by wearing my USC gear. We're like, hey, I'm wearing USC, so I'm one of you guys and I want to connect. So it was hard. Maybe because, I don't know, just my approach, my demeanor, or like you said, I came in with the focus and that was my focus. I didn't want to really party and be out there, right?
Of course.
I would say maybe less than 5 that I really made a connection with the LA people. Well, obviously one of them was a professor and then others were students. 1 was from there, 2 were from in the LA area. Just make that connection of working together, brainstorming. I mean, overall, I think it was more of an academic acceptance than a community acceptance.
For those who are listening who moved recently to the great LA area, what tips or knowledge can you share with them in order to navigate the city of Los Angeles? You came with a plan. Some people don't come with a plan. They come with a dream. And sometimes that dream doesn't become a reality. But what peace of mind can you give them?
Have a plan B, C, and D.
Exactly.
Yeah, because if plan A doesn't work, you have something to fall back in regards to just living situations, job situations, connections. I would say do your research before you even go into the LA area. That way you know where exactly what vicinity you're going to sort of explore, right? Where you're going to be in. So huge. I'm sure there was a lot of areas I just didn't get to because I felt safer in certain areas or just was more focused on staying at USC campus, but I would explore out again because of my curiosity. And I think also there was moments where I was like walking down our alleys and past 9 o'clock and I was like, what the heck am I doing? For me, it was a shortcut, but for me, I was like, I don't even know this place and I'm over here walking this way. But I think going back to being vigilant in my surroundings, and I would walk with a purpose, but I also walk being vigilant, like, okay, if something pops up here, I'm going to jump this fence or I'm going to run this way. I had to look ahead of anywhere I was walking. So I knew where to go to in case something happened.
Okay.
So mentally, I was always prepared and aware of my surroundings. So that helped a lot. I guess that would be another advice, be aware of your surroundings because it's just chaotic in different sense.
So in other words, if you're going to be book smart, beat street smart, balance the both.
Yes.
And be a mold of your environment.
Correct.
Guillermo, here's the tough question. In one of the episodes of State of LA, our two hosts, Donald and Michael, we both covered about the controversy that went on leading up to the undergraduate graduation ceremony of a higher honor student that couldn't speak at her commencement. Any thoughts on that controversy that happened earlier this year, that the valedictorian couldn't speak because of her ethnic background, the things that are going on in her parents' country and her culture, and you graduating around the same time, but now in a graduate program?
Yeah, which was a very, very interesting time. Obviously, we see what's happening out there, but when it's impacted within your own community up close, everybody saw it around the world, around their country, just around California, especially the universities. And then having this moment of like, oh my God, I finally made it. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to have my family. You know, seeing it. Okay, this is going to be the selfish me saying this, right? Like seeing it from like, oh my God, it's going to be taken away. I'm not going to graduate. They're going to shut everything down now. That was my stinking thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, wait a minute. This is more of a bigger platform than just my own selfishness of graduating, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, USC is all about pride, and basically, you know, the motto is fight on, right? Where was that motto of fight on during that time? Was it because, you know, the higher perspectives were trying to protect themselves and not kind of fall into that area of like, I'm choosing this over this, right? They could have handled it differently, but I think, you know, behind the scenes, you got people who just are, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say controlling, but kind of moving things in a way where we don't see, right? So it wasn't handled the way it should have been handled, and it moved too quickly. By the time it moved too quickly and they wanted to sort of fix things, it was already too late to go back to do anything because there was so much backlash, and they just went with it. I mean, I don't know the whole administration sort of point of view on it, but just once they kind of like, well, this is where we're at, we're just going to move forward with this. That's when those the walls came up, the barriers that we always learn about breaking down, especially in a social work program, right? We learn about that, like the barriers and all that, and it was just a lot of eye-opening to the point where, you know, graduation was the last thing on my mind. It's like, okay, what are they going to do to fix this? Even if it cares if it's late, give her the opportunity, the platform to speak and find an apology somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And it never happened.
Yeah, no, it never did. And it's still like unanswered questions. But that's another conversation for next time when probably Michael and Donald take the stage. But anyways, transitioning, where are you now? What's the population you work with? And what some milestones you have reached at the current job you're working at?
Well, thank you for that question as well. Previous one is a tough one and just kind of spark some things like, okay, what has happened, right? Because it's not over. But when we think it's not over, there's a lot more work to be done. And so what's next for Dr. Guillermo Rodriguez is a lot. You know, earning your doctorate is like the top of the level of academia, but there's a lot more after that, right? In regards to, you know, how you stay relevant with your community, education, staying current with research, data, everything. This is, I guess you could say, hot news in a sense. So my last day working at the hospital was this past Wednesday. And so I worked as a clinical social worker in the emergency room department. As you can imagine, very fast-paced and chaotic, but fun to give back. So that was my last day because most people were surprised because obviously they love having me there, but most of the physicians were like, we're not surprised, meaning that they knew there's a lot more for me out there.
Right.
And so what ended up happening was I accepted an offer, and then October 7th, I'm going to be working in Hollister, which is another community, another county. And so I'll be working with that community. It's called the Community Food Bank of San Benito County.
Nice.
So why the food bank? People are like, why the food bank? They give away food. Yes, they give away food, but there's more to a purpose for that, right? You come across different lives that are going to be impacted, not just because they need food. Other things are happening, like substance use, domestic violence, sexual assault. I don't know, people getting out of jail. As we know, right? When you talk to people, they tell you the life stories sometimes, and it's like, how do we help them navigate through that process? So going to that community is going to create a little bit more impact there. And especially coming with my knowledge of substance use and mental health, it's going to guide the team and the community at a different platform. And what I want to do is create more programs, not just for the food bank, but have the food bank be recognized as a place that they could go to, not just to get food, but for resources and support and guidance and referrals to other places that they could get into. So starting October 7th, I was offered and I accepted to be their next CEO for that agency.
Congratulations. That's huge. Wow. You went from a counselor at the Methadone clinic to being an assistant director to being a student, not only to higher learning, but also to a community that you were serving to now being a CEO.
Yes.
Congratulations. That's a big milestone. And especially in the San Benito County, another agricultural county that could take you either, small, like little alleyway that could take you up the state, down the state, or take you to the center of the state, whatever have you. Tough community that also needs a lot of resources. But this is great. Guillermo, thank you for being a great guest, coming over, sharing your experience. We just wanted to teach people of LA about being vigilant and those that are coming to LA with their dream to come up with a plan as well. And also about recovery. If you have anybody that is struggling with substance or alcohol abuse, it's okay to ask for help and help them to ask for help too. Please be an advocate of your family if your family is being at risk. Guillermo and I came from a community that mental health and recovery is very important and families are very important, as you heard today. He's even trying to advocate for community for those who need food that also might need other resources and referrals. Please contact someone within your county right away to ask for help. We all need the help, and help is important. But thanks again to Guillermo Rodriguez. It was a great honor, a great pleasure. And thank you for helping me be under your wing and molding me as a great counselor as well in men's residential.
Well, thank you for having me here. This is a great way to kind of bring awareness and education and just,
exactly
from a different perspective, right? Me coming to LA and leaving LA in a different format.
Exactly. All right. Anything, Mike?
Thanks. I think that about wraps it up. Appreciate you coming on, man. Important to have these kind of conversations and to highlight that, people can turn things around and then help other people overcome any addictions or any problems they may be facing. Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys want to drop any kind of, I don't know if it'll be like a hotline or something they could contact if they are dealing with something themselves.
Doctor?
So the national helpline, they'll direct you to your city, your county of just getting any type of help for mental health, substance use. The national helpline is 1-800-662-HELP.
And please ask for help, especially for those who are struggling. And you don't face everything alone, okay?
No.
Not at all, okay? All right, cool. This was a great episode. Thanks again, Guillermo.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike, for giving us the platform once again. All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, definitely, man.
All righty then. So this is State of LA. I'm Billy Delgado along with Michael Pugh and our guest, Guillermo Rodriguez. All right.
Have a good day.
Awesome. You too. All right.
Bye-bye.
All right then. All right, Mike. Peace.
Peace.